Namaste. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti. I was debating in my mind about two topics which I thought of covering in this series of talks. One is about the ego, and the other is the spirit of inquiry that is there in the Upanishad, and which, if it comes first, will be better. Then I thought that finally, the spirit of inquiry that comes in the Upanishad should be the one first we discuss, then we go to the next topic. That's what is about the concept of ego in the Indian philosophy. Both these things are connected with spirituality and the mankind. So let's look into this idea of what is called as the spirit of inquiry in the Indian culture, in the Sanatana Dharma that we have. One of the latest torchbearer of this Sanatana Dharma of the recent times, or probably somebody who is so powerful after Adi Shankaracharya, is Swami Vivekananda. Vivekananda was there 1893 at the Parliament of World Religions, and that is where he created an impact in the world society about our culture, about Sanatana Dharma, and the spiritual values held in this particular culture. It was so powerful when he represented Hinduism at the Parliament of World Religions. The American press has reported that such an extraordinary, wonderful wisdom that we get from this man, and to send our missionaries to give them the religion to this country is like is so unwanted kind of an idea that they have given. So that was the kind of an impact that Swami Vivekananda has given in the Parliament of World Religions. When he gave his talk, he said that I'm bringing the message from the most ancient cultures of the mankind to the latest country, and that's what is America, the youngest country, the oldest cultures and the youngest country. One of the press people picked up that idea and then asked Swamiji to elaborate on that point that he said. Then Swamiji elaborated saying that 10, 15,000 years ago that this culture was there, vibrant, and even till today, it's a living culture. During that time, several thousands of years ago, whatever the cultures were there in this world, they don't exist anymore. Like the way that Mesopotamian, Babylonian culture, Greek culture, you don't get to see those cultures at all. Here and there, that some practices, some traces here you can see. But as the culture does not exist today, whereas this culture, whatever that was existing about 10, 15,000 years ago, exactly exists today also. The concepts and the mantras and the chanting that we do was what happened 10,000 years ago, today also the same. Like the mantra that we said, peace chant, Shanta mantra, Om Sahana Bhavatu, Sahano Bhunaktu, Sahaviryam Karavavahai, Tejasvinavadhitamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. This was the mantra which comes from the Vedas. And at that time, Vedic people, students used to chant this regularly. And today also that we chant. And I'm sure that another 10,000 years later also people continue to chant these chantings. So that means this is ever existing. That's why it is called as Sanatana Dharma. Sanatana means ever existing. And ever existing means there's another important idea is that what should be the thing which can be ever existing? What undergoes continuously a change along with the changing situation outside, changing values of the people, changing the environment, we also change, adapt, but at the same time, the spirit behind this is continuing all these years, so mankind. So that's why this is called a Sanatana. And Dharma it's very difficult to translate that word dharma, but then we'll say that principles of life or the way of life that we have in this particular culture, it is Sanatana Dharma. In fact, the Sanatana Dharma of this values that is there even before even the word called religion was born. So therefore, Sanatana Dharma does not belong to any religion. It is something which is beyond all the religions, before all the religions were there. So therefore, that to call this particular culture as part of as a religion, Hindu religion, it is not a right kind of an approach towards that. So when you look at the Sanatana Dharma, the basic principles, the basic literature that we have in the Sanatana Dharma are generally people know that this is what is the four Vedas: Rig Veda, Yajur Veda, Sama Veda, Atharva Veda. Veda word comes from with, that's what is the knowledge. So the knowledge of what? Now, these are the four different areas, four different textbooks of this particular knowledge. Unfortunately, some period of time that people had given a wrong notion saying that these Vedas or these texts are coming from outside of India and then they were brought to India, and that is what they said, Aryans, which are do not belong to India, they brought it, so therefore Aryan invasion movement settlement from Middle East, Middle Central Asia, that they have moved towards India. But this is unfounded because basically in this culture itself, that any elderly person, any learned person, we call them as Arya. Again and again we get that reference in the scriptures, in the books that we have in this particular culture. So therefore, Aryans are not some different species or different kind of people, they are coming from somewhere else, but it is in our own society somebody who is learned, who is knowledgeable, who can guide us in the right direction without any prejudice. We call him as Arya. So therefore, that there is nothing like some Aryans have come and brought this particular knowledge. They are associated knowledge with Arya because the knowledgeable person, we used to call them as Arya. So that's why there is nobody has brought this particular knowledge. It belonged to this knowledge, this particular place only. But then what are these Vedas? If you look at the Vedas, it seemed to be, the very name suggests it as a with is knowledge. So it's a bank of knowledge, or it is the compilation of all the knowledge that was there. A lot of times people even mystify this whole thing, saying that these are apaurusheya, that means somebody has, some revelation has taken place and people have written or whatever it is recorded. I don't want to subscribe to the idea of somebody sending it out of blue, some God sent like this. Let's try to be much more realistic in the sense that what it is now today, and when you look back several years ago, after all, the technology development, the science development might not have been there, but the people were the same. When you look at that way, that about 200, 300 years ago, that people who traveled to these areas, then they maintained a diary, they collected all the data that was happening in this land, and then prepared that. We have such evidences that people have written that. Like Megasthenes is somebody who has written an account of what all the things that were happening here. Hyun Chang is another person who has written. Similarly, Mircea Eliade, he has written account of his travel to India. It's like that, and in the world over also, that people have written their account of whatever they travel in a new culture and a new situation, and that they recorded whatever that ideas are there. So this is something which is happening all the time, whether it is today, 500 years ago, 1000 years ago, 5000 years ago. When you look at that way, then Vedas also, in my view, are something which is somebody maintained a diary of whatever that is happening. Where was it happening? If you look at it, general information that we could get from this Vedas is that whatever that was happening in the northeastern region, northwestern region, it's supposed to be Rig Veda, and northern region it is Yajur Veda, and northeastern region is Sama Veda, and central and southern part of this particular region called as the Bharatakhanda, the part of India is supposed to be the Atharva Veda. So these four Vedas are about the diary that is maintained by the people who traveled in these areas and collected the data and put it. And this happened several thousand. And when we maintain a diary, naturally what happens is in the diary, the topics are not in the regular order. They will be very random. That means to say somewhere some topic is there, afterwards you jump into another topic. As the situation takes you, you go ahead with that. And person who has recorded, the persons who record, they are called as either Vyasa or the Vyasas. In my view, that this is what happened. The wise people specially trained to record these things, and then they set the people recorded over a period of say several hundred years probably. That's what resulted into these four Vedas. And you can also find the references about various places, geographical locations in that particular Vedas. Especially when you see that Samaveda, the main content of the Samaveda, is connected with the art, architecture, and the music and dance. These are the things which are part of the Samaveda. In fact, Upanishads also refer to Sama way of chanting and singing and dancing. These are the things where they use the Sama. So when you look at that way, it matches so much with the northeastern region. That means to say, right from Odisha, you can go to Assam and then further Manipur, and beyond that, when you go further, right up to Thailand, Indonesia, Malaysia, you can see the same kind of a dance, music, art, architecture, sculpture. That's all prevailing, as if it's something which is very natural for them. If you go to Bali, you can see that every house that they put such wonderful sculptures in front of their houses, and the Bali falls in this particular region. So when they say Bharata Khanda, it included all these places. Geographically, that we never try to conquer anybody, but culture-wise, that people have adopted these things. Similarly, when you go to the northern part of India, where the yajnas, yagas, and all that, you can find it in Yajurveda, and the reference of Himalayas and Mandakini and Bhagirathi, all these things that you can find in Yajurveda. So, like that, these things seem to be referring to a collection of ideas that are there in that particular region. Now, when we maintain a diary, that diary does not have anything like a particular topic and different kind of chapters that are there. So therefore, somewhere there is metallurgy aspect of it, somewhere there is the farming aspect of it, and somewhere the chantings that are there about the and the Gurukula learning aspect of it. So like that, there are several things that are covered in the all the Vedas, four Vedas. They cover all these things that are there. In fact, the kind of development that we had at the time when these Vedas are written was so extraordinary, both in terms of material world and in terms of a material world or beyond. And that is what you could see the material world. There are so many things about the metallurgy. There are so many things that you can understand about the architecture, art, and then preparing the mm, town planning. All these things are available in the Vedas. That means our people knew all these things. That's the reason why when you go to the excavations of Mohenjo-daro, Harappa, and ancient civilization unearthed, you could find the well-planned cities, well-planned ways that the things are there, including a well, how complex way the well can be constructed to go deep inside to get the water, and in what way when you do it that you get the pure water. All these things are given in this particular Vedas. In fact, one of the differences that you come across in the Vedas is nail cutter, Nakanikrindanam. That means to say, several thousands of years ago, people knew about the culture, the civilization development was so much that they could find out this nail cutter. Amount of knowledge that is there about the health and about the way that what can help us the maintaining our health is given so much in the Vedas. All this knowledge that is there in the Vedas, and out of this knowledge only that various other texts that have come up. Like for example, the text for the health, and that's what is Ayurveda. In fact, unfortunately, people translated Ayurveda as Indian system of medicine. It has nothing to do with medicine. It has to do with the health. So therefore, it's a health book. That's why when you look at Ayurveda, you don't feel that you are reading a medical book, but more or less that you are reading some spiritual text. So that is the kind of thing. So these books they have evolved, they are called as Upavedas. Upavedas are the Vedas culled out from the Vedas and then put them into the form of various books, texts of various knowledge. Like that, we have Dhanurveda, Ayurveda. Then, like that, we have several things that are there which are talking about various systems that were there. But then, these are all the systems which are about the world outside. But there is another very important aspect of it is that if you look at any culture, the culture has something which is the core around which this culture develops. This is what Swami Vivekananda said at the Parliament of World Religions when the reporter asked him that, how do you say that this culture survived 10,000 years where, or more, where the other cultures went into the books of history? Vivekananda said, every culture has a narrow current. Every culture has a core. That's what he calls it as narrow current. And it is based on this narrow current, this culture survives. So it is the Indian culture which has the narrow current, which is spirituality, because of which it survived for 10,000 years or more. Yes, what Swami Vivekananda said in one word, it looks so simple, so clear that you can see in the world that various cultures have, if you look at various cultures as the culture that they are now onlooker, you can see that they have got a central theme, central core activity. Like, for example, when you go to Europe, the central core of activity, Germany, the core of activity is the strength. That's why there, people, the strong person is the person who is a winner. In fact, their rural games is that the huge stone, whoever carries it and walks it fast, runs faster than anybody, he is a winner. It's about might. And that culture trend you can see today also, that the German cars are steady cars and their roads are steady roads to handle those cars, BMW. And that is the reason why the Germans do not have the speed limit on the roads, because the cars are so steady to stand on the wheels on those high roads, autobahn. Whereas the same thing when you go to the Europe, the parts of Europe like French and Italian, it's the art, architecture. You go walk in the house streets that you can see that on the house that there are murals, the paintings that are there. Fashion shows belong to the that part of the Europe. So that means to say art and architecture, art and these things are supposed to be the background behind the culture of Europe, of French and Italian. Whereas the same thing when you go to England, the root of their culture, the core of their culture is regality, and that's what is royal. That's one of the reasons when you go to Europe, England, that you see Trafalgar Square or Buckingham Palace or this palace, that palace, or like that. It is Queen Street. So everything is around that royal, and it's wonderful. And people also respect like that. Whatever that royal thing is there, it belongs to the people officially. Like, for example, wedding of their prince, or when the prince has given birth to a child, and that is like a national news, national importance. It's very nice. People have respect for their king like that. Similarly, when you go to Japan, the core culture of Japan is miniature. Everything is small. If America produces big cars, Japan produces small cars. If India has a huge mango tree, Japan has a bonsai mango tree. Equally efficient. It gives wonderful fruits. Similarly, that their roads, very narrow, but then the small cars, they maneuver so beautifully. I wonder how they manage it. Their efficiency is in creating that small things and make it functional. Very beautiful. Miniature is the core culture of Japan today. When you go to America, the core culture of America is trade, finances, money. That's why you could see that the skyline of any city, when you go, the skyline of any city has these two main tall buildings that are there, and other buildings are around. And if you look at all these buildings, they're all bank buildings or the insurance buildings because they have to do with the money. They have to do with the trade. So therefore, that their whole focus is on the trade and money. Their whole psychology thinks in that direction. I'm not saying it is good or bad, but what I'm saying is that that's what their whole approach is all about. You can see that. I went to Boston to give yoga class, and then I was asking them to do the abdominal breathing, one of the practices in pranayama. They were finding it very difficult to do the abdominal breathing because when you breathe in, the stomach should come out. It was going in rather than coming out. Maybe because of the cultural habit that they had, it was like that. So I had to find out a device to see that how they can efficiently do abdominal breathing. In India, it was easy for us to do that because it's very well trained. And it is natural also because when you look at the children, the children always do abdominal breathing. That means to say, when we were born, we were naturally doing abdominal breathing. But what happened to us when we are grown up? Because the influence of outside that they could not do that abdominal breathing. So I had to find out a device to see that the breathing improves abdominal level because that's a very important thing. Abdominal muscles carry about 70% of your gas exchange, alveoli. So therefore, that we need to have a very good abdominal breathing. Explain to all of them, but then they say how to do that. You can't take the abdomen and pull it out. So therefore, I just thought a very simple idea, and that is that there was a book which may be weighing half pound, and then I made them to lie down and then put the book on their tummy below the diaphragm and asked them, come on, inhale and push the book up. And they tried few, 3 times. Then they started doing it. They were able to do it. Wow. They were very shocked, surprised. They were very happy. Small little simple technique could help their abdominal breathing. But what happened was that American psyche is American psyche. I went back to Boston 2 years later, and then I found out in the same yoga center, they have a half a pound sandbag. And on top of it, the title it is given, it says abdominal breathing bag. And $5 a piece or $10 a piece. Wow. I wondered, what we thought it should be very simple, that they made a business out of it. They could make a nice, wonderful way they can package and sell it. So this is what is their core culture. The core culture is business material. That's the reason why people who want to do the business, they rush to Japan, they rush to America, because that's a place for doing the big business. World's richest people, that you find them in America. So that is what is their core culture. Like that, when you come to India, what is the core culture for 10,000 years? And that is what is spirituality. But when we say spirituality, it looks very hazy idea. It is not very clear. We need to clarify that. Particularly when you go to the Vedanta Upanishads, when you go to the Vedas, because we are talking about ancient culture. So therefore, that Vedas which are talking about the ancient culture, there are two different portions of text that are there. The whole text is divided into two parts. And one part is called as the Jnana Kanda and the Karma Kanda, and the other is called as the Jnana Kanda. Karma is action portion, activity portion, and Jnana Kanda is the knowledge portion. Jnana means knowledge, Kanda means part of it. So when you actually look into the Vedas, you don't have that way two different divisions. Like with the Rig Veda part 1, Rig Veda part 2, part 1 contains Karma Kanda, part 2 contains Jnana Kanda. It is not like that. It's all in the same book. But somewhere in between that you find out this Jnana Kanda aspect of it. And the Jnana Kanda consists of these Upanishads. The knowledge portion contains all these Upanishads. And these Upanishads you can find somewhere in between, just sporadically coming up. When you look at all these things, it looks like that there are various aspects of culture that's going on. And amidst all that culture that is there, it is going on in several different clusters. And each cluster has something which is the core activity which is going on. And around that, all the other peripheral activities called as the Karma Kanda is there. So Karma Kanda is a peripheral activity, and the Jnana Kanda seem to be core activity. It's like the way several peaks of Himalayas. And then there are several peaks, and each peak is something like a Jnana Kanda, and then all around surrounding that is supposed to be the Karma Kanda. And you can understand that very clearly when you come to a place like Vivekananda Vyasa Center. There are, if somebody maintains a diary of that Vyasa Center, where it's a yoga university there, and various therapy centers and all those things that are there. If somebody maintains a diary, you can see from morning to evening, a milk van is coming supplying milk, and then cows are there grazing out. And then people getting at 5 o'clock in the morning, and somebody is there to cook the food, and some hot water is supply is available. So like that, various things that are there. And these are all the things which are peripheral activities. They're all subserving a core activity of this particular center. And that's what is the yoga training supposed to be the core activity. Accounts may be there, administration may be there, all the other things are there, but these are all useful peripheral activities. The moment that you treat them as the core activities, then you are doing the disservice to the center. They shine, and then the core knowledge of yoga and spirituality will go away because that you have not given importance to that. But that is supposed to be the core activity of the place, not for an individual. Like, for example, a milk fellow comes and supplies milk and goes away. He is not connected with the core activity, whatever that yoga teaching that's going on. His supplies only, his core activity is supposed to be supplying milk. So one's own perception of the core activity at that place is different. But then collectively, the place core activity is supposed to be yoga, spirituality. Like a friend of mine who went to America, I went to Prashanti, lived for about 3 months, and then came back to Germany. He was in Germany talking to his friends, and I was there with him. And then he was saying superlative ideas about Prashanti. It's so wonderful, so beautiful. Vyasa's headquarters campus. It's such a lovely place. Nature is there around, all those things he said. And that person asked, the stranger asked this visitor who went to Prashanti and came back, you lived for 3 years, 3 months there. What is that really attracted you? Most wonderful thing that you could think of in Prashanti. He said the breakfast is wonderful. See, for him, the core activity is breakfast, not yoga and all those things. Yeah, individual may have different core activities, but the activity of this particular culture is spirituality, and that's what is the Upanishad. So Jnana Kanda is supposed to be the core, and Karma Kanda is the peripheral. Karma Kanda takes care of to see that the society runs, but Jnana Kanda is the one which sustains the society. And not only that, the people also look at this Jnana Kanda, people also look at this knowledge portion. The core activity is something with that respect in that particular culture. Now, what is this Jnana Kanda? Basically, Jnana Kanda are the Upanishads. What are Upanishads? When you look at this Upanishad, that's the basic core activity of that. The very meaning of the word suggests Upa means close to, Ni Nischayena, and Sat. There is a dialogue that goes on between the student and teacher. They dialogue, they talk, the exchange of the knowledge take place. And that exchange of the knowledge is based in the form of Upanishad. This is also known as Vedanta. Why is it called as Vedanta? Veda means there's books that are having this knowledge. Vedanta means something which is there at the end portion of it. Anta means end. So if you take this book of Veda, whether it is Rig Veda, Yajur, and you flip the pages from the last to find out that is where the Vedanta or the Upanishads are there. No, it is not like that. Upanishads are somewhere in between. It's not at the end. But then still, why do you call it as Vedanta? It's a very beautiful poetic expression to say that that is the Vedic Upanishadic knowledge is Vedanta. Why it is called as Vedanta? Like the way that a plant is called as also in Sanskrit as Lata. No, you put a plant, you put a seed of a nice, wonderful flower. And the thing is, this the seed sprouts, and then the life is there. Wow, you are happy now because the plant is coming up, and you are waiting, and this plant grows to big enough so that it bears a flower. Now you are waiting for the flower to come up, because the whole journey of that seed to the plant has to result into that flower. And next day, when you get up in the morning, you see a wonderful, beautiful flower. You are enchanted. That flower is the end of the journey of that particular plant. So that is why plant is called as Lata, and the flower is called as Latanta in a poetic way. It is fulfillment of the journey. It is not the end of the journey, fulfillment of the journey. Veda is a journey, the journey of mankind, and Vedanta is supposed to be the fulfillment of our life. That means this particular culture has given a very beautifully a purpose of life or a goal of life or the end point that we are supposed to lead. It's supposed to lead you into that. This is something which is very important. So Upanishads are the most important aspect of the life. That's why this consider Arnold Toynbee said that this culture survived because of Upanishads. Upanishad knowledge are useful solace for my in life and beyond death. So like that, several people have talked about this Upanishad. Extraordinary, wonderful knowledge. But what is this knowledge is all about? There is a before you even go to the knowledge, you say that knowledge is the basic idea of knowledge is when you question and then you get an answer. It is by questioning that you develop knowledge. As long as we did not question, we did not develop the knowledge. But once we started questioning, then the knowledge opened up. And this questioning is something which is very important. So Upanishads also are in the form of questions. It's a question the student asks and the teacher answers. The student is called as Antevasi, and then the teacher is called as Guru. One who learns, a Sishya, is also the student. One who teaches is supposed to be the Guru. Now, this word is also very important for the teacher, the idea of Guru. The Guru word comes as somebody who removes the darkness, throws away the darkness. And what is the darkness? Darkness of ignorance you throw away and then bring in the knowledge. Therefore, it is Guru. And his interest is not in teaching. Therefore, he is not a teacher in a strict sense, but he's a Guru. He is trying to quell the ignorance that is there within you, takes away the ignorance that is there within you. So many times that the teacher spends so much time to remove the ignorance of one person. Maybe for a short period of time, he can remove the ignorance of somebody. Removing the ignorance is the most important thing. Once the ignorance is removed, then the student also becomes knowledgeable, and that knowledge is something which is based on experience. Therefore, he becomes like a teacher. Teacher is not just somebody who has the knowledge, that the Guru does not have only the knowledge, but he also has the experience of that. That knowledge is no more a knowledge, but it is experience. So therefore, the student also gets into that experience. Because a student becomes like that experience of the teacher, that's why he is called as Antevasi. That means to say, Antaha. At the end of it, he also becomes like a Guru. And that's what we see. It is not passing on the knowledge, but it is passing on the experience. So the difference between the connection between the teacher and the student is one of quantity, the quantity of information. But the connection between the Guru and the Sishya, Antevasi, is one of quality, is one of personal being, transformation, a raw fruit becoming a ripe one. This is what is the journey. Therefore, it is something, an experience which is transforming you, and this knowledge. We have given that importance to questioning. This particular culture question has not been rebuked, discouraged. Many other religions, many other areas, the questioning has been tabooed. That means you do not question. But in the culture, in the Sanatana Dharma, in this particular culture, questioning is encouraged. You can ask any question. But what kind of question that Upanishad take up? Is it any ordinary kind of questions? No. These are something which is extraordinary, wonderful questions. Eternal questions, fundamental questions. Like, for example, is it going to rain today in the city? This is a local question. The answer may be yes, it might rain, might not rain. The season is like that, the cyclone is like that, therefore it might rain. So all this kind of things may be there. It's basically on the speculation. And there is no way you can say out of your experience. So this is the knowledge about the world outside. And the knowledge is based on utility. Like, for example, what you make in the world outside, all that is about the material utility. Whereas, what are the questions that Upanishad takes up? Most fundamental questions. What are these? These are the questions like, what's the origin of the creation? Yato va imani bhutani jayante, yeni jatani jivanti, yat prayanti apsapirti. Where from all this thing comes up? This vast creation that is there. And what is my origin? Where do I come from? All these things are the most fundamental questions. Fundamental questions because that everybody is connected with that. Everybody is needed to know about that. Similarly, what happens death after death? Because everybody dies. Even though we find out, we try to find out, we try to do so much of an inquiry. For almost like several thousands of years, we've been inquiring what happens after death. Till now, we have not come to any particular idea. Eternal questions. 10,000 years ago, man asked that question, what happens after death? In the Upanishad, that there is a discussion that goes on, where Nachiketa asked the Yama, the death god, what happens after death? Buddha asked that same question. So like that, there are several people who have asked questions over a period of time. 10,000 years, even today, man is concerned about that. I'm sure 10,000 years later also, man will be still questioning, what happens after death? The fundamental question. Similarly, another fundamental question is that who am I? We use this word I, right, left, and middle all the time. But we have never inquired about that question I. But then this question is asked in this particular Upanishad. When you look at these questions or the nature of the questions of the Upanishad, what's the origin of creation? And what is the use of this I? What is this I? Or what happens after death? Anyway, these questions are asked for 10,000 years. These questions will be asked another 10,000 years and all those things. But then what is that? Ultimately, it looks like that this discussion that goes on, question answers, seem to be useless questions, useless answers. Because by knowing that what is the origin of creation, do you mean to say that you get your food, you get your clothing, your shelter? None of these things. Your material prosperity will be there. Even that is also not guaranteed. So that means to say, from the point of view of material world, these questions are useless questions. Whatever that is useless, but then still people take it, it is like ornament. Like the way ornaments are not necessary for us. Only thing is that they are something which is fixed on us. Like the way that a painting that's there in the house, it's not a necessity, it's a luxury. So therefore it is entertainment value, luxury value. It is not really necessary. It does not fill your stomach, it does not provide you clothing. That's why communist, socialists, they're against Indian culture, Indian philosophy. They say that what is this philosophy? It will not earn you roti, kapda, makan. The food, shelter, clothing, it cannot give you. Why is that? You're discussing. What's the use of it? By knowing what's your origin of creation, do you mean to say that you will get a lot of money? No, you do the secular knowledge, go work, produce something, till the land, and then you earn money. And that fills your stomach, that provides you shelter. So therefore, these questions are questions which are supposed to be aristocratic. It's like a painting. You go to a poor man and say, "Do you like to have a painting?" He says, "First of all, I should have a wall so that I can hang the painting on that. If I don't even have a wall, where is the question of painting?" So, therefore, that wall is something which is fundamental. Fill the stomach, that is food, necessary, without which you ask me to say. All the poetry and all that, it's all luxury. It's all something which is like aristocratic. That's why communists are angry with us, Indian culture, because Indian culture spends time on all these useless questions. But then, though they are useless, like the way painting is supposed to be useless, it is something which is ornamental, it's not fundamental. But some people get caught up with that. That's the interesting aspect of it. Some people get caught up with that. Like, for example, we have heard one of the greatest painters of the last 200 years the world produced is Vincent van Gogh. He was one of the greatest painters. Especially today, when you go to visit Vincent van Gogh and his thing, you see that there's such extraordinary paintings. Each painting costs $1 million. But those days when he was doing it, nobody was prepared to take it. In fact, he would make the painting and give it to his friends to hang it on the wall. Because that he is a friend, he requested they put them on the wall, but the moment he goes away, they take it out, put it underneath. How unfortunate that he was. And nobody paid him money. He didn't have money at all. But in spite of the fact that he didn't have roti, kapda, makan, shelter, clothing, and all that, that was taken care of by his brother. In spite of all those things, but his passion for the painting was so extraordinary. Extraordinary. Ultimately, I mean, his brother used to give him money just sufficient for 5 days bread, 7 days. But out of that also that he used to buy the bread for 4 days, and then 3 days he would go without food. But then he would put that money in the paintings. Similarly, we have such great people that there. Van Gogh is somebody who everybody knows about it, but the not so very famous sculptor who is there. His name is Roman Brancosi, and he was there in Romania. Extraordinary, wonderful sculpture that he would do it, but he didn't have any money. He didn't have any money because all the time, every drop of his blood he was using only for the sake of that sculpture that he was doing. One of the most extraordinary sculptures, The Kiss, made him very famous. But famous today after he died. During his time, nobody recognized him. But some crazy people have idea about these things. So I was also crazy like that. I went all the way just in search of him. And then I went to his place. I saw the shed where he was working, supposed to be a place like which is smaller than our cow shed in Prashanti. But that's the place where he was producing all that kind of thing. And today his sculpture is sitting in the center of the Times Square in New York. And that's extraordinary, wonderful paint sculpture. Only, and when I went there to see the curator who was supposed to be taking care of that place, he looked at me, laughed. He said, "You came all the way from India just to see this one? Even people here, they don't come to see him, his paint works." And he passed away a long time ago. During First World War, he died. Before the First World War, he was painting, he was doing all that sculpture. One Indian king was fascinated by that, Maharaja of Holkar. And then he paid some money as an advance for some sculptures that he wanted to put it on his palace. Unfortunately, after that, in short time, World War I took place, and then he was destroyed, and then he lost his life, unfortunately. So these are all the people, they're supposed to be aristocratic, but then they were so passionate about that. Same way, these questions, the questions like, what's the origin of creation? What happens after death? These are all the questions which are like aristocratic. In fact, even when I was child, when I wanted to learn these things, all the elders in our village, they said, "Raghu, why are you interested in all these things now? You first of all become an engineer or a doctor, make money so that you can live comfortable. And after retirement, you can learn about all those things." They never understood the passion for that question that I had. But then anyway, I even promised them that I become an engineer. But then I want to know about these things. But then they were refused to give an answer for me. And our interest is very lucrative. Like, for example, when somebody near and dear dies, we are also caught up with the question, what happens after death? But then what happens? We go to the crematorium, we bury the body or burn the body and all that. And then afterwards, we come to a Starbucks, and with that coffee, we dissolve that question. Now we don't have that question anymore. But look at one young fellow, hardly 20s. His name is Siddhartha. He never saw a dead body in his lifetime. But then only one time that he was introduced to by his friend Chinna took him out into the city because his father made sure that he never goes out to the city to see something which is like that. But it so happened one evening Chinna takes him to the city, Lumbini, and there he saw a dead body. And people carrying the dead body, he didn't even know what is death. He said, why are they carrying him? He said, he is dead. What do you mean by dead? He is no more living. What do you mean by that? Well, we all die one day. We don't live. You also die. I also die. What happens after death? That's it. We don't know what happens. But this question became so serious. So serious. He said, Chinna, come on, let's go back to the palace. Chinna drove him to the palace. He's an elderly person. Drove him to the palace. As soon as he went back to the palace, he looked at his young wife. 1 year he got married. He said, look, this Chinna says that everybody will die one day. We are all dying. She says, yes, we all die. Come on, let's have food now. See, what was such a serious question for Siddhartha? It was not even a question serious for his wife. That night he could not sleep. He was suffocating. He came out and he walked away from the palace. Chinna was there with him and said, come back. He said, no. Why don't you come back to palace? You go back. But why don't you come? Siddhartha replied, palace is on fire. It's like on fire. It's burning. We all die one day or the other. I'm going to find out, search for an answer. What happens after death? So serious that Siddhartha went away, left that place, went all the way to Bodh Gaya, Sarnath, etc., etc. Finally, in Gaya, he sat down. He sat under the tree and meditated to find an answer for that. So that means to say this is not an ordinary question. There's a very fundamental question. What happens after death? Similarly, we all have the question, does God exist? Some believe in God, sometimes we don't believe in God because the things did not work out, because we want God to be a very good handiworker, helper. If it does not work, we are afraid, we don't deny, we say we deny God, we don't accept God. Oh, God does not exist. But then our activity, and then we sincerely go to the temple, pray to the God, say all these 1,000 names of the God, everything we say. Do we really have faith in God? How do you know? Does God exist? We never knew. But then life goes on without questioning that. But here is a young fellow. His name is Naren. And then he was also going with his mother to the temples and they're offering prayers and this and that. And he was singing nice, wonderful bhajans also. In spite of the fact, all those things he was doing, he suddenly realized he doesn't even know whether God exists or not. But he's singing the praises of God, hymns of God. And that really caught him up. So he should find out, does God really exist? So he tried to ask the people that they're around, are supposed to be people who are talking about God, spiritualistic people. And he would catch hold of them and then ask them the question, have you seen God? It's not any ordinary persons, great persons. Like those days, some of the great spiritual leaders, one of the great spiritual leaders was Vijay Krishna Goswami. Thousands of people would attend his discourses about God. And then this boy also went, 11-year-old boy, 12-year-old boy, went to him, sought his interview and went there and bowed in front of him. He said, yes, my dear boy, what have you questioned? Have you seen God? Wow. Vijay Krishna Goswami was shocked by that question. And he tried to give a customary answer that people give, saying that, yeah, God is omnipotent, God is omniscient, God is everywhere, God is everything. No, I'm asking a different question. Have you seen God? Well, God is something which is everything. No, have you seen God? Don't tell me about all these things. It was such a strong impact on that particular person. He said, no, I have not seen God. I'm trying to see God. If you're trying to see God and you talk to the people about God, why should I listen to that? He came out. Just because that he did not get the answer, he did not die. His curiosity has grown higher. His passion has grown higher. And then he went to another great person those days, that is Dayanand, the Swami, you know, Rabindranath Tagore's father, Devendranath Tagore. He went to him and I tried to find out. It's so difficult to get an interview for Devendranath Tagore, but then this boy went there. And Devendranath Tagore, with a smile, has said that, yes, my dear boy, what can I do for you? What can I help you? Have you seen God? Yes, my dear child, you are extraordinary. Yes, you are very bright. No, have you seen God? Finally, ultimately, Devendranath Tagore also said that, no, I have not seen God. I'm trying to see God. Like that, he went to several people, scores of people, trying to find out whether anybody has seen God. He did not get an answer. And the more and more that he tried to inquire, more and more he was getting the negative answer. He was being so much caught up in that question, so much. It became like he was in that question all the time, thinking about that, not worrying about the food that he takes, not worrying about his dress, the way that he's wearing, whether he wears the slippers or not. He's just coming to the school. Even in the school, also, that the teacher, when he's teaching, he was supposed to be attentive to the teacher. But ever since he was caught up with this question, he would not pay any attention in the school. He would not talk to his friends. They all used to feel sorry about him. How unfortunate what happened to him. This boy was so bright, so extraordinary. But then later on, why is this fellow got up with this useless question? Has anybody seen God? Why are you bothered about that question? Whatever supposed to be something which is such a important question for him, it was not only an important but was a useless question for others. So they used to think that he turned mad. They did not even pay attention to him. In the classroom, he was sitting in one corner, looking through the window into the sky outside. Only thing that's going on in the mind is, has anybody seen God? Is God real? These are the questions that was going on. Oblivious to the class, whatever that's going on. It was an English poetry class that was going on. And the professor or the principal who was officiating that, he was talking about some Wordsworth poem. And while talking about that poem, at one place, while explaining that, he said that the poet must have written this when he had God experience. Simply with indicating that this kind of a poetry, this quality of poetry, you will not get if you are an ordinary human being. So it must be something of a different caliber. Therefore, he must have had God experience. When the teacher said that the poet must have had God experience, that something immediately struck this boy, Naren. At once he became alert and he stopped the teacher there. He says, yes, professor, who's that poet who has seen that God experience? Where does he stay? What's his connection? What is the way that, is there a way that I can go and meet him? A flood of questions. The professor said, I'm sorry, this poet was there in England and he was long time ago, he passed away. It was like a depressing answer. You can't meet him. But then Naren did not stop there. He extended the question further. And he said, my dear professor, you seem to have people, somebody who has that God kind experience of God like. Is there today, contemporary, anywhere in the world who has this kind of God experience, who I can go and meet, talk to them? I don't think, I never came across anybody who is of this particular caliber, who has that kind of an experience, of God experience when he wrote the poetry. Another depressing answer, but then it did not stop there. Ray of light, a hope of light just comes, a spark of light comes up like that. After saying that, there is no poet I know who has this kind of an experience. The, the teacher didn't stop there. After a little pause, he said, but yes, one person is there. He is a temple priest. He is not even a poet. He is not a literate. He is illiterate. He is a temple priest. Stays in a temple called Dakshineshwar, Kali temple. I have not seen him, but people talk about him. He converses with God. He has seen God. But please don't take my words. It's people I've heard about it. That one hint was good enough for this boy Naren. He hopped out of his classroom, out of his table, and ran out of the classroom. Ran all the way to Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, who was there at Dakshineshwar. The temple priest knocked on the door and asked the and the man opened the door. Immediately, Naren asked him with that gasping breath because that he came running all the way from Calcutta, "Are you Thakur? Are you Ramakrishna?" And he very peacefully, Ramakrishna said, "Yes, people call this as Thakur, Ramakrishna. Yes, please come in, sit down." He said, "No, I have a question for you. Have you seen God?" Thakur said, "Yes, we can discuss about all those questions. This is not the only question that you have. Come inside, sit down, have some water." But this boy was so desperate. He said, "Have you seen God?" He was not even taking a breath. "Have you seen God?" When third time this boy asked, 14-year-old boy, then Thakur replies in 3 sentences. They are the most wonderful sentences. The first sentence he said, "Yes, I've seen God." With a beautiful smile, with a peaceful face. Most affirmative answer for the question, "Have you seen God?" is that, "Yes, I have seen God." You don't want anything more than that. Your answer is complete. So, for the question that the boy asked, he has given a complete answer. And it's a direct answer. He did not beat around the bush. Now this boy can go. Finish. Over. The conversation should have been over. But then Thakur did not stop there. That's a beauty of somebody who has that soaked in that experience. Now, any stretch of imagination will not give you an idea what can be the continuation of that, which Thakur said. Because he has given an answer, it's over. What's more than that? And that's what the Thakur gives the second sentence. And when you hear that second sentence, you can see how potential, how powerful that sentence is, what Thakur said. He said to Naren, "Yes, I have seen God, and I have seen God more clearly than I see you now." Why this sentence becomes so important? Because this boy might go away from Thakur after walking for a distance, and then suddenly he might have a doubt whether this Thakur has seen this God in the reality or in the dream or in his hallucination or in an experience of some drug or drink or something like that. Yes, a lot of people who go for drinks, they have God experiences. But then what is reality for all of us is that that's not real, but this world is real. That's why Thakur makes it clear. I have seen the God more clear than I see you now. If there is anything like dream, seeing you is the dream. Seeing God is never a dream for me. Wow. You didn't even ask for that, and Thakur gave you that. Extraordinary answer. And this answer can only come for somebody who is deeply soaked in that experience. He did not even stop there. He gave one more sentence. Anything more than that? Any stretch of imagination cannot give us that answer, but Thakur gave that answer. He said, "Yes, I've seen God, I've seen God more clearly than I see you now, more real for me. And third is, I can show you God. Naren never expected this answer. He was expecting that he'll be meeting another person who will customarily say that God is omnipotent, God is omniscient, and all those things. He was waiting for that. But on the other hand, not only he got a positive answer, but he got that level of answer where he said that I can show you God. And that sentence was so much on Naren, he was almost like paralyzed. And Thakur held his hand, said, my dear child, you want to see God? I can show you God. Come on. And then he started making to walk with him. 10 steps he walked. If you have gone to Dakshineshwar, you can see that Ramakrishna Paramahamsa's room, there's a corner. And then there is Kali temple, and inside when you go, and that's where the main temple is there in the backside. So Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, Thakur, walked Naren 10 steps with him, holding his hand. And Naren walked with him for 4, 5, 10 steps mechanically, and then slowly tried to release the grip of this Thakur, Ramakrishna, and said, Thakur, you know what? I'll come back again. Huh? I'm directly coming from the school, and my mother will be waiting for me. I'll go back home, and then I'll come back sure once again. Thakur at once leaves his hand and said, my dear child, yeah, you can go back. Yeah, you are directly coming from the school. I know that. Mother will be waiting. Go home, and then there's a lot of homework. And not only today mother is waiting, tomorrow your wife will be waiting, another day your daughter will be waiting. Somebody or the other will be waiting for you to go back. You don't have to come to me. I didn't ask you to come here. Whenever you want, you can come. And finally, punchline Thakur gives that the most fascinating. He said, you know, my dear child, I thought you are interested in seeing God. No. That means the kind of dedication that Naren had was not good enough. And Thakur replies saying that, I thought you are serious in seeing God. You know what? If somebody catches you by neck and pushes your head into the water, at that point of time, all that you want is a one breath, gasp for one breath. And that way, when you gasp for answer for this question, you have an answer. It's not for the questioning. The answers are for the quest. Do we have the quest? And the quest comes when there's a purity of questioning. You can go back home. And that stuck Vivekananda Naren, and he followed Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. Later on, he became Vivekananda. You see, these Upanishads are the extraordinary, wonderful literature where the discussion goes on between the student and teacher. When there is a quest, deep interest. If you don't have quest, there is no answer for you. The text is there, book is there, and these days, not only the books are available, they are there in the Kindle also. You can download. You don't require any teacher. But if you have a quest, then you have an answer. A teacher is somebody who creates that kind of a quest within you and tries to answer that. All the Upanishad literature, when you read it, you can see the students, how deeply they were caught up with these questions. In one of the Upanishad, the teacher says that after come to me 1 year later and follow these principles, and if I have an answer, I'll give you. Yadi vidishyamaha, if I know that, then I will tell you. And the student comes back 1 year later after doing all that penance because he is so much with that question. He soaked himself in that question. And that's what is the answer. That when these question answers are there, the highest order, answer is not just only bookish, not only language, but it is the experience. That experience is the most important thing. And one such important idea is that you are consciousness. Consciousness is the base of the universe. But is it with us only a bookish knowledge, or is it something which is our own experience? And when can we have an experience? When we have the deep urge within us to realize that. It's not that only the quotations from the book that I have, but I have deep down within my personality that urge to know about it. Then I become a sadhaka. That's why this culture has given very high importance to a person who is seeking this answer for these fundamental questions, like what is after the death, and who am I, and the question like what is the origin of creation. Answer for all those things is only one answer. That's what is Brahman, Atman, consciousness. You are that consciousness. That's why Vivekananda said, each soul is potentially divine. You are that. And then each soul has that goal. Each soul is potentially divine. And the goal is to manifest this divinity. You need to realize you need to manifest the divinity within. And that's what is the whole idea of yoga. So, therefore, this yoga and then our own basic personality, what we are, is connected with that. And that's what is a spiritual journey. Once you have this goal, you may be in the first step in the ladder in the staircase that's going to this particular temple, sanctum, sanctorium. But once you have taken up these steps, that means you are in the path towards the temple, towards the God inside the temple. We have, that's why in India, all the temples are situated on the top of the hills, and then they are provided steps and making symbolically to see that look, you try to come up during your sadhana, all these steps to come up. There are several people at several levels in the society going towards this ultimate goal, and that ultimate goal is defined by Sanatana Dharma. If I wish the whole world takes up this ultimate goal, then there is a purpose of life. Purpose of life is not peripheral. Purpose, whatever that you earn the money, whatever that you earn the name and fame, whatever you earn in the name of that, how many people talk about it, all those things are peripheral. You do not get all the ultimate truth, ultimate reality is realizing that you are the consciousness, you are the ultimate behind it. That's why the spiritual journey is the real, true journey of life, purpose of life. We'll stop it here, and next week we will look into what is called as this ego, the I, how this formation takes place. These things we look into it. We'll stop it here. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.